She slapped my hand in front of everyone. The plate I had barely touched slipped from my fingers and shattered on the floor. Silence. All eyes turned to me, but no one said a word. Not even my son. She stood above me, her voice cold and sharp. "You're a disgrace, Isabel. You should be thankful we even let you sit here." Then she leaned down, almost whispering, but loud enough for everyone at the table to hear. "Take your things. You're not welcome here anymore." And just like that, Lorena, the woman my son had chosen over everything, tore apart the last sliver of dignity I had left. I stood there blinking, heart pounding, cheeks burning with humiliation as she motioned toward the door. I thought Javier would stand, say something, anything. But he just lowered his head and sipped his wine. That was the night everything broke. But what Lorena didn't know was this. I still had the title to the house, and I never signed it over. Years ago, I was the woman who smiled quietly in the background while others took the credit. I built this family from scraps, with torn fingers and sleepless nights. I scrubbed hospital floors at dawn and cleaned rich people's kitchens long after sunset, just so Javier could stay in school. His father, God rest his soul, left us little, more than debts and a cracked photograph. I worked double shifts, ate leftovers cold from a napkin in the break room, wore the same winter coat for 7 years, so that Javier could have new books, a clean uniform, and a hot meal. When Javier met Lorena, I was hopeful. She was polished, confident, beautiful. The kind of woman who entered a room and made people stand straighter. I didn't mind that she looked at me like I was old furniture. I thought, maybe this is what my son needs to become a man. When they got married, I gave them everything I had saved. Every peso. The wedding, the down payment for their house, even the small inheritance from my sister who had passed. It all went to them. I wanted to give them a future. I moved into the little room near the laundry. "Just until I get back on my feet," I told them. But months passed, then years. I cleaned their floors, folded their laundry, picked up Valentina from school, cooked dinner when Lorena was too tired, and comforted Javier on the nights he came home defeated from work. I became invisible. Sometimes Valentina would ask, "Grandma, why do you eat alone in the kitchen?" I would smile and say, "So I can watch over everyone while they eat." The truth was, Lorena said I made the dining room feel cramped. They had no idea that the mortgage was still in my name, that every month I quietly made the payments from the small pension I received. I let them think they owned the house, because seeing them happy, seeing Valentina grow up in a home with laughter, was all I ever wanted. But love can only blind you for so long. That night, the night of the dinner, it was supposed to be a celebration. Javier had been promoted. Lorena was radiant, glowing in a new dress that probably cost more than my monthly groceries. They had guests, business partners, old friends, important people. And they asked me to cook. Not just cook, but disappear once the food was ready. "We want to keep things elegant tonight," Lorena had said, her lips barely curving into a smile. So I cooked. I peeled, chopped, roasted, seasoned. My hands ached from the work, but I did it with pride. After serving everyone, I quietly sat at the corner of the long table. I barely picked up my fork when Lorena stood. "What are you doing here?" she asked. I looked around, confused. "I just thought, since everyone was seated." She stepped closer. "This dinner is for our guests. You said you didn't want to be in the way. You promised." I only wanted to sit and listen, I whispered. You're embarrassing us." Then came the slap, the crash, the silence. I looked at Javier. Nothing. Valentina, sweet Valentina, looked stunned, her eyes glassy. She opened her mouth, but Lorena cut her off. "Go to your room." I stood, my body stiff and trembling. My knees ached, but I walked out with my head high. I didn't look back. That night, I sat alone at the bus stop. The cold crept into my bones, but it wasn't the weather that froze me. It was the realization that I'd become a ghost in my own story. They had erased me. And in that silence, that bitter wind that wrapped around my shoulders, I made a decision. No more. After that night, I stayed in Doña Clara's apartment for a week, living in a haze. I couldn't sleep well, but I didn't want to sleep at all. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lorena's face twisted with anger, the mockery in her voice as she humiliated me. The pain was sharp, but it wasn't the slap or the words that stayed with me. It was the silence that followed. The way my own flesh and blood, Javier, my son, had turned his back on me without a single word of protest. He had stood there, motionless, his glass of wine untouched, as I was torn apart in front of everyone. It wasn't just the physical pain of that moment that cut through me. It was the emotional weight, the crushing realization that I had spent years invisible. Invisible in my own home, invisible in my son's life. Lorena's cruelty wasn't just about the slap. It was a slap to everything I'd sacrificed, everything I'd given. It was an assault on my very identity. But the worst part wasn't even the humiliation. It was the fact that I had let it happen for so long. I couldn't let it go on anymore. I couldn't remain the shadow, the woman who was only noticed when someone needed something. The maid in her own home, the unpaid caregiver, the invisible mother and grandmother. I had to change. And I was going to make sure that they knew just how much they had taken for granted. It was a hard pill to swallow, but I knew I had to act quickly. If I didn't, I would lose everything. I took a deep breath and called Señor Aguilar, my lawyer. I had known him for years. He helped me buy the house when I was still scraping by, working long hours in the kitchens of rich families. He knew about my life. He knew about my struggles. And I trusted him, Señora Isabel, he said, his voice surprised but calm. "It's been a while. How can I help?" "I need you to start a process," I told him, my voice steady despite the storm inside. "The house. I need to put it in my name again. There were some things I didn't sign before. I need everything under my control now." There was silence on the other end of the line, but only for a moment. Then he replied, "Of course. We'll take care of it. You've always had the rights." "I know," I said, my heart starting to pound with a mix of anxiety and something else. Power. I felt it stirring deep inside me, but I need it done quietly. I need them to know nothing until it's too late. "I understand," Señor Aguilar said. "I'll start the process immediately." I hung up the phone and sat back in my chair. The room was quiet, but my mind was racing. I had always kept a low profile, always stayed in the background, never made waves. But that was the last time. I wasn't going to let them keep treating me like I didn't matter. It wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about respect. It was about claiming the life I had built, the one that I had created with my own hands and sweat. I was done, being invisible. The next few days felt like a blur. I stayed with Doña Clara, working with the lawyer and preparing for what was to come. Every time I thought about the house, I felt a knot in my stomach. But I also felt something else, a surge of determination, of power. I had the tools now, the leverage, and I wasn't going to waste it. Lorena began to notice the changes. She started asking questions. She would call Javier and demand answers. I don't understand, Javier. Why can't I access the bank account anymore? Why is there a problem with the credit cards? Why did we get that letter? Javier, still confused, tried to calm her down. It's just a glitch, Lorena. Maybe Mom didn't update something. I'll take care of it. But as the days passed, more and more things began to go wrong. Lorena couldn't understand what was happening. She was used to control. She was used to getting her way. But this time, nothing worked. One day she came home to find the locks changed. She stood in front of the door, her hand frozen on the handle. What the hell is this? She screamed. Javier rushed over. What's wrong? I can't get in. The door won't open. Javier stared at the lock. That's strange. It should be working. Let me try. He fumbled with the key for a moment before looking at Lorena, wide-eyed. It's not working. There's something wrong. Lorena tried again, but the door wouldn't budge. It's just a mistake. It has to be. She pulled out her phone and tried to call someone, anyone, but there was no signal. Javier looked at her in confusion. Maybe we should call a locksmith. No, Lorena snapped. I'll handle it. But she couldn't. I watched them from the corner of the street. I had changed all the locks in the house, hadn't I? Yes, I had. Everything was set up to make them feel the pressure, to make them see that things were changing. And that was just the beginning. The next day, another letter arrived. It was formal, addressed to both Javier and Lorena, and it sent chills down my spine. The letter informed them that the house was under review and that all permissions for access had been revoked. The deed, which had been in my name all along, was now in dispute. The contract they thought they had was no longer valid. When Lorena read the letter, she turned white. She screamed at Javier, accusing him of not knowing what was going on. How could you not tell me? She shouted. We were supposed to be partners in this. Javier, pale and trembling, tried to calm her. I didn't know, Lorena. I thought everything was fine. I thought she gave it to us. Lorena's face twisted in disbelief. How could she do this? I gave up everything for this family, and now she's taking everything from me. I could hear her screaming through the walls. The tension between them was palpable. It was only a matter of time before the truth came crashing down. The next few days were filled with frantic calls and frantic attempts to make sense of what was happening. They didn't understand it. They couldn't. They had no idea how far. I had gone to protect my rights, but it was too late. The game had begun, and I was no longer the invisible woman who cleaned the floors and cooked the meals. I was the one who held the cards. And soon they would have to face the consequences. The tension in the house was unbearable. The air was thick with unspoken words, silent accusations, and fear. Every room seemed to echo with the weight of the unacknowledged truth. Javier and Lorena had no idea how deep the hole they were digging was. They were scrambling to piece together a narrative that made sense, but the foundation beneath them was crumbling, and they didn't even know it yet. I could feel it, the calm before the storm. Lorena was beside herself. Every time she walked into the house, she seemed to be looking for something to blame, something to control. But the more she searched, the more she found herself trapped by her own actions. The letters, the lock changes, the sudden disappearance of access to the house. It was all too much. She wasn't used to being powerless. She wasn't used to having to ask for permission. But now, it was happening. And I could see the panic rising in her eyes. It was a beautiful thing to witness. One morning I woke up early. The birds were singing, and the sun was still low in the sky. I sat by the window sipping my coffee, watching the world begin to wake up. But inside, my thoughts were heavy. I knew what I had to do. I called Javier. He answered after the second ring. "Mom?" His voice was tense, like he already knew this conversation wasn't going to be easy. "Javier, I need to see you today. It's important," I said. He sighed. "What now, Mom? Is this about the house again?" "Yes," I replied, my voice steady. "But it's more than that. I need you to come by alone." He didn't argue. There was no point. He could sense the gravity in my words. When he arrived, I was already waiting for him in the living room, the papers spread out in front of me. He walked in and sat down slowly, looking at me with a mixture of confusion and guilt. "Mom, what's going on?" he asked. "Why are you doing this? Why are you taking everything from Lorena?" I leaned forward, my gaze steady on him. "Javier, I've spent my entire life supporting you, supporting this family. But I've been invisible. Invisible to you, invisible to her. You and Lorena have taken everything I've done for granted. I gave up everything for you two, and you don't even see me." He opened his mouth to protest, but I raised my hand. "Let me finish. For once, just listen." Javier closed his mouth and looked at me, his expression softening. "I've done everything for you. I never asked for anything in return. But you've let her tear me down. You've let her humiliate me in front of everyone. And you just stood by and watched. You didn't say a word when she slapped me, when she called me a burden. Not a word, Javier." He lowered his head, unable to meet my gaze. I could feel the guilt radiating off him, but it wasn't enough. "Not anymore." "I don't want revenge, Javier," I continued. "I just want you to understand. I want you to know what I've been doing for all these years. You've never seen it, never recognized it. But now you will." I pushed the papers across the table toward him. "What is this?" he asked, his voice shaky. "It's the deed to the house," I said. "The one you thought was in Lorena's name. It's in mine. All along, it's been in my name. And now it's time to put everything right." Javier's face turned pale. "No, that can't be. How is this possible?" "I told you, Javier. I've been working on this for years. You never saw it because I didn't want you to. I didn't want to make you feel uncomfortable. But now, I have no choice. This is the reality. And if you want to keep the house, if you want to keep everything that you and Lorena have built, then you need to acknowledge the truth." I let the silence hang in the air. I could feel the weight of my words settling over him, and I knew he was processing it all. But the next words he spoke shocked me. "Lorena won't accept this," said quietly. "She won't let you take everything away. You don't understand. She'll fight you. She'll destroy you." I stood up and walked over to the window. I've spent my whole life fighting for everyone else. Now it's time for me to fight. For myself. Javier didn't respond. He couldn't. There was nothing left to say. Later that afternoon, Lorena came over to confront me. She arrived at the door, her heels clicking against the floor with each step. There was an icy edge to her presence, a fury that radiated from her like a storm waiting to erupt. She didn't wait for an invitation. She stormed into the living room, her eyes burning with accusation. "What have you done?" she demanded. "What do you think you're doing?" I didn't flinch. I wasn't scared of her anymore. Not after everything. "I'm doing what I should have done years ago," I said calmly. "I'm taking control of my life, and I'm taking control of what's rightfully mine." She laughed, but it was a hollow, bitter sound. "You think you can just take everything from me? From us? You'll regret this." I didn't answer. There was no need to. Her anger was nothing more than a distraction. Lorena's face twisted, with rage. "I'll fight you. I'll make sure you never see a penny of this. You think you can just waltz in here and take everything I've worked for? You think this is how it ends?" "No," I said, standing tall. "This isn't how it ends. This is how it begins." The confrontation had begun. The battle lines were drawn, and I was ready for whatever came next. Lorena's fury only grew with each passing moment. She could sense the shift, the control slipping away from her grasp. The woman she had always underestimated was no longer the quiet, obedient figure in the background. Isabel had finally found her voice, and with it, her power. I watched Lorena, the once unshakable force in my life, now trembling with uncertainty. She wasn't used to being confronted. She wasn't used to someone standing up to her, especially not me. And it unsettled her. I could see it in the way her hands trembled, the tightness in her jaw, the brief flashes of panic that crossed her eyes before she masked them with her usual arrogance. "You think this is over?" Lorena hissed, stepping closer, her voice low and dangerous. "You think you can just take what's mine and walk away?" I stood there, unfazed, holding the deed in my hands, the physical proof of everything I'd quietly built and sacrificed for. It was more than just a piece of paper. It was my life's work, my foundation. And now it was mine to control. I had lived in the shadows long enough. It was time to step into the light and reclaim everything that was taken from me. "I don't want what's yours, Lorena," I said, my voice steady and strong. "But I'm not going to let you destroy me anymore. This house, this family, everything. It's been built on my sacrifices. It's time you understood that." She sneered, the venom in her voice thick with contempt. "You think anyone will believe you? Your son? He's mine now, Isabel. He's never going to side with you over me. He's not going to throw his life away for a woman who's always been invisible." Her words stung, but they didn't break me. I had spent years being invisible to them, but no more. I leaned forward, placing the deed on the table between us, a silent declaration of war. "I'm not asking for your approval, Lorena. This is about truth. And whether you like it or not, the truth is that I've given everything for this family. Everything. I've raised Javier, I've supported you both, and I've built a life here, only to be dismissed when it suited you. I'm done being your doormat." Her face twisted with rage, and for a moment, I could see the cracks in her facade. She was no longer the confident, scheming woman who had thought she controlled everything. Now she was just a woman desperate to hold on to her illusions of power. "You'll regret this," she spat, her voice trembling with fury. "I'll make sure you lose everything. I'll take this house from you, and you'll be nothing again." I could feel the tension in the room thickening, like the calm before a storm. But I wasn't afraid. I wasn't backing down. Not this time. I had spent so long being passive, allowing others to control my fate. But now I was in control. And I wasn't going to let Lorena destroy me any longer. "I've already lost everything, Lorena," I said quietly, the words heavy with meaning, but I'm not going to lose myself anymore. She stared at me, fury blazing in her eyes, but there was something else there too. Fear. I could see it. and I knew in that moment that I had won. The truth was, Lorena had always been afraid of losing her grip on everything. And now that I had taken control, now that I had forced her to confront the reality of what I had done for this family, she was unraveling. Without another word, I turned and walked away, leaving Lorena to stew in her anger, but I knew that she was only getting started. She would fight back. She would try to manipulate, to twist everything to her advantage. But I was ready. I wasn't the same woman who had let her walk all over me. I wasn't the same woman who had silently accepted her cruelty and her lies. I was stronger now, and I would make sure that this time she couldn't get away with it. The next few days were a blur. Lorena became more erratic, calling incessantly, demanding answers, pleading for me to reconsider. But I didn't pick up. I didn't answer. I couldn't. She had made her choice, and now I had to make mine. But even as I ignored her calls, I could feel the weight of what I'd done. I'd crossed a line, and there was no going back. Javier hadn't reached out. I hadn't expected him to. Not yet. But I knew the moment would come when he would have to face the truth. And when that moment came, I would be ready. The days dragged on like a thick fog. Every hour felt like an eternity, the silence between us growing louder with every moment. Lorena's calls became more desperate, her messages more frantic. But I remained resolute, not answering a single one. I had no desire to hear her plead, no desire to listen to her lies, her false promises of reconciliation. This wasn't about reconciliation anymore. This was about power. My power. A power that had been silently buried for years, but that I could no longer ignore. I was done being invisible. The tension in the house was palpable, and I could feel it in every corner. Javier had retreated into himself, staying in his office for hours, rarely leaving the room. I could hear his voice on the phone sometimes, talking to Lorena. He didn't know what to believe. His confusion was understandable, but I had no patience left to comfort him. He would have to learn the truth for himself. One evening, a week after the confrontation with Lorena, I heard a car pull up outside. The familiar rumble of tires against gravel sent a jolt through me. I knew it was Javier. He hadn't spoken to me since that day. He had avoided me, refusing to meet my eyes when we passed each other in the hall. But tonight, I could tell something had changed. He was coming to confront me. I heard his footsteps in the hallway before he knocked on the door. He didn't wait for an invitation. He never did. He walked in, his expression unreadable, and closed the door behind him with a soft click. "Mom," he said quietly, the weight of the word heavy with uncertainty. "We need to talk." I motioned for him to sit. "Go ahead," I replied, my voice calm but firm. Javier hesitated, his eyes searching mine as if trying to read me, to understand what had happened to the woman he had once known. I could see the conflict in his eyes, the struggle between loyalty to Lorena and his love for me. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why didn't you trust me with this?" I leaned back in my chair, folding my arms across my chest. "I did trust you, Javier. For years, I trusted you. But you and Lorena, you both kept me in the dark, used me, and took everything I gave without a second thought. I was invisible to you, and I couldn't bear it anymore." He looked down at his hands, wringing them nervously. "I didn't know. I didn't know how much you were doing behind the scenes. If I had known..." "If you had known what, Javier? Would it have made a difference? Would you have helped me?" I asked, my voice cold now. You didn't see me. You never saw me. I'm sorry, he said, his voice breaking. I was blinded by everything Lorena said. I thought she had your best interests at heart. But now I see. I see what she's done. His words stung, but there was no time for softness now. You're still blinded by her, Javier, I said sharply. You still think she's innocent in all this, but she's not. She never was. You've spent all these years believing her. Lies. You've let her control everything. Control me. Control you. Control this family. And you didn't even know it. Javier stood up abruptly, pacing the room in agitation. What do you want me to do, Mom? What do you want me to say? I'm just trying to understand. Everything's falling apart. I watched him, my heart heavy with a mixture of pain and frustration. What I want, Javier, is for you to see the truth. To finally see what I've done for this family. To understand that I'm not some background character in your life. I'm not just some invisible woman who did everything for you and your wife without ever asking for anything in return. I've been living for everyone else for years, and it's time you recognize that. Javier stopped pacing, his eyes softening as he turned to face me. I do see it now, he said quietly. I'm sorry. I should have done more. I should have been there for you. I stood up, walking over to him and placing the deed in his hands. The truth is, Javier, I've been holding this family together for years. You didn't know it, but I did. And I don't expect you to fix everything. But I need you to understand that the house, the life you've built, it's been built on my back. And you need to acknowledge that. Javier stared at the deed in his hands. His expression, unreadable. He didn't speak for a long time, and I could feel the weight of his inner turmoil. I never wanted this to happen, Mom, he finally said, his voice thick with emotion. But Lorena, she's pushed me too far. I never thought it would come to this. I never thought she would do this to you. To us. I nodded, my eyes never leaving him. She's done more than that, Javier. She's been playing you like a puppet. And if you don't wake up, if you don't see the truth, then you'll lose everything. His hands trembled as he held the deed. And I saw the resolve in his eyes. It was a moment of clarity, one that had taken far too long to come. But it was there. He was finally seeing the truth for what it was. I'll do whatever it takes, Mom, he said softly. I'll make this right. I promise. I gave him a small, weary smile. You don't need to promise me anything, Javier. You just need to be honest. With me, with yourself, and with Lorena. That's all I've ever wanted. The silence between us grew, but it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was a silence of understanding. A silence that spoke volumes of the unspoken truths we had both been avoiding for so long. Javier wasn't completely free from Lorena's influence yet, but I knew this was the first step toward his freedom. And it was the first step toward mine. The days after my conversation with Javier were a blur of anxious anticipation. I could feel the weight of what was coming. The inevitability of the moment when everything would finally come crashing down. The house, once a place of comfort, now felt like a battleground. And I, for the first time in years, was ready to fight. Javier had left with the deed in hand, and I had hoped, no, I had prayed, that this time he would see the truth. But a part of me still feared he would turn, away, that he would retreat into Lorena's lies, back into the comfort of his ignorance. She was still manipulating him, still whispering in his ear, trying to convince him that I was the one who had betrayed them all. But there was no turning back now. It was late one evening when the final confrontation took place. Lorena had stormed in, her fury visible from the moment she stepped through the door. She had finally managed to corner Javier, dragging him into another argument that was destined to spiral out of control. I had known she would come for me. This was her last attempt to regain control, to tear down everything I had built. And I was prepared for it. But I wasn't alone anymore. Javier had made his choice, and now he had to face the consequences. The kitchen was quiet, the soft hum of the refrigerator the only sound filling the space. I stood by the counter, my hands steady, my heart calm. I could feel the storm brewing outside. Lorena was coming, and when she arrived there would be no more pretending. The door slammed open, and there she was. Lorena. Her eyes were wild, her face flushed with anger, and her voice was sharp as she spat. "You think you've won, don't you? You think this house, this family, will be yours now? You're nothing without me." I didn't respond immediately. I had learned over the years that silence was often the most powerful weapon, and tonight I would wield it like a sword. Javier was standing behind her, his posture stiff, his face a mixture of confusion and regret. He was caught between us, unsure of where his loyalty truly lay. But his eyes, those eyes I had spent a lifetime loving, were finally starting to show the cracks in the illusion Lorena had carefully built. "I didn't want it to come to this," I said quietly, my voice steady, but laced with years of buried emotion. "But I can't stay silent anymore. Not for you, not for Javier, not for anyone." Lorena's lip curled in disgust. "You think you can just come in here and claim what's mine? I built this life with Javier, not you. You're just a shadow in the background. Nothing more." Her words were meant to cut, to push me into submission. But they didn't have the power they once did. I wasn't afraid of her anymore. I stepped forward, the deed still in my hand, and placed it on the table with a sharp thud. The sound seemed to echo in the silence that followed. Lorena's eyes flickered to it, and for the first time, I saw doubt cross her face. "You didn't build this life, Lorena." "I did," I said, my voice growing stronger. "I built this house, this family, with my own 2 hands. And you only took from me. You used me. But not anymore. This ends tonight." Javier's gaze shifted between us, his face pale as the reality of the situation began to sink in. He had known the surface of things, but now he was seeing the depth. The lies Lorena had woven for years, the manipulation, the control. It was all crumbling in front of him. "Mom, Javier started, his voice strained. I held up my hand, silencing him. "No, Javier. You've had your chance to stay silent. Now you need to hear the truth." I turned back to Lorena, whose face was twisted in a mixture of rage and disbelief. "This house, this family, it's mine. I don't want your approval, and I don't need your approval. But I'm done being the invisible woman in your life, the one you discard whenever it's convenient. I've given everything for this, for you, and for Javier. And it's time you realized the truth." Lorena's eyes narrowed, her hand clenching into a fist. "You're lying. You're delusional. Javier, don't listen to her. She's trying to tear us apart." But Javier's silence spoke louder than any words. His hesitation, his uncertainty. It was all I needed to see. He wasn't with her anymore. He was with me. Lorena's breath hitched, her composure faltering. She could see it too. The walls were closing in on her. Javier was no longer her pawn. He had seen through the facade, and the truth was too much for her to bear. You've lost, Lorena, I said, my voice calm now, almost too calm. It's over. I won't be your victim anymore. She looked at me one last time, her eyes filled with venom and disbelief. You'll regret this, Isabel, she hissed, her words dripping with venom. You'll regret ever crossing me. But there was no fear in my heart, no hesitation. I had already won. She turned to leave, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. But before she could reach the door, Javier stepped forward. His eyes were filled with a mixture of guilt and determination. I don't know how it got this far, Mom, he said, his voice thick with emotion. But I'm with you now. I see it. I see everything. And I won't let her tear this family apart. Lorena's head whipped around, her eyes widening in shock. Javier, no, you can't do this. But it was too late. He had made his choice. The door slammed behind her as Lorena left, her figure disappearing into the night. The house was silent, once more, but this time, the silence was different. It wasn't the silence of fear or submission. It was the silence of victory. Javier stood beside me, his face still full of conflict, but there was something else there now. Hope. The same. Hope that I had once felt for him, for our family. And for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe again. The weight of the moment settled over me, thick and unrelenting. For years, I had been the invisible one, the one everyone overlooked, the one no one seemed to care for. But now, things were changing. Lorena had left, and Javier, my own son, had chosen to stand by me, his mother. The journey ahead would not be easy, but it was mine to walk. And for the first time in years, I felt like I had a chance. The days that followed were a blur of emotions, of healing, and of waiting. I knew the battle wasn't over. It had only just begun. Lorena may have been out of the picture for now, but I could feel her lurking in the shadows, planning her next move. She wouldn't give up that easily. But I wasn't going to let her control my life anymore. I had been patient for far too long, and now I had the power to fight back. Javier and I didn't talk much in the days after Lorena left. It wasn't that there was any tension between us. It was more that we both needed time to process everything that had happened. He had been so caught up in the web of lies Lorena had spun for years, and I knew it would take time for him to fully come to terms with the truth. I found myself sitting in the living room one evening, the soft light of the lamp casting shadows on the walls. It was quiet, almost too quiet. I had grown used to the noise, the chaos that Lorena had brought into our home, but now, in the absence of her presence, the silence was almost deafening. Then, the sound of footsteps broke the stillness. Javier entered, his face tense, his eyes searching mine as if trying to figure out what to say. He stood there for a moment, as if weighing his words carefully, and then he spoke, his voice soft but full of emotion. "Mom, I need to apologize," he said, his words heavy with guilt. "I don't know how I let it go on for so long. I was blind to what was happening, to what she was doing to you, to us. I should have seen it. I should have known." I stood up, walking over to him. I placed a hand on his shoulder, a gesture of reassurance, of forgiveness. "Javier, you don't need to apologize," I said, my voice steady but filled with warmth. "You didn't know. And I never wanted you to be in the middle of all of this. But now that you see it, I need you to understand something. This isn't just about Lorena. This is about our family. About us. We've been through a lot, but I'm not going to let her destroy everything we've worked for. I'm not going to let her tear us apart again." Javier nodded, his eyes filled with understanding. I get it, Mom. I do. And I'm with you. I'm going to help you make things right. And just like that, everything shifted. I could feel the weight in my chest lift, replaced by a surge of hope I hadn't felt in years. For so long, I had carried the burden alone. But now, for the first time, it wasn't just me. Javier was standing with me, and together, we were going to take back what was rightfully ours. The next few days were a whirlwind of planning and action. Javier and I began going through the documents, every contract, every financial record, every piece of paperwork that had been hidden from me. And there it was, staring back at me from the pages. The truth. The proof of everything I had suspected. Everything Lorena had tried so desperately to keep from me. The house, the businesses, everything we had worked for. It was all mine. And now, with Javier at my side, I was going to make sure that no one could take it from me again. But there was one final piece to the puzzle. The legal battle. I knew Lorena wouldn't go down without a fight. She was resourceful, manipulative, and she wouldn't hesitate to drag this out in court if it meant getting what she wanted. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I had the power, I had the evidence, and I had Javier's support. I made the call to my lawyer the next morning, the phone ringing in my ear as I waited for the line to connect. "This is Isabel," I said when the lawyer picked up. "It's time. I want to proceed with the divorce and the legal separation of assets. I want everything in my name. Let's make this official." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line, followed by a low, steady voice. "Understood, Isabel. We'll start the process right away." And just like that, it was done. The wheels were in motion. There was no going back now. As the days passed, I could feel the tension building. Lorena had not yet made any move to challenge my claims, but I knew it was only a matter of time. She would come back, desperate and vengeful, and when she did, I would be ready. But for now, I allowed myself a moment of peace. A moment to breathe, to take stock of everything that had happened. I had been through hell, but I had come out the other side stronger, more resolute than ever before. And no matter what Lorena did, I would never go back to being the woman I had been before. I was Isabel. I was the one who had built this house, this family, and I would be the one to tear it down if it meant protecting what was mine. The day of the final confrontation arrived, and everything felt different. The air was heavier, charged with anticipation. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach, the tension that had been building for weeks now. I had prepared myself for this moment, but even now, facing the inevitable, I felt a flicker of uncertainty. Would I get the closure I was seeking? Or would Lorena still find a way to twist everything to her advantage? I stood in front of the mirror, my reflection staring back at me. The woman I saw now was not the same one who had been humiliated, betrayed, and pushed aside. I had shed that skin, and what remained was someone far stronger, far more resolute. A woman who knew what she was worth. A woman who was no longer afraid to fight for herself. I checked my phone. No messages from Lorena. No word from my lawyer yet. But that didn't matter. Today I was going to take control. Today, I was going to make her see the truth. Javier was there with me, standing by my side like he always had. But now there was a different kind of unity between us. He wasn't the same son who had been manipulated by Lorena's lies. He was my ally, and together, we were going to confront the woman who had torn our family apart. The doorbell rang, cutting through the silence like a gunshot. It was time. I walked to the door with purpose, my heart pounding in my chest. Javier followed me closely, his expression serious but calm. As I opened the door, there she stood. Lorena. She looked just as I remembered. confident, poised, wearing that smug smile that always made my blood boil. But today, there was something different about her. There was a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes, a momentary hesitation as if she knew the game was over. And I wasn't about to let her get away with it. "Isabel," she said, her voice sweet, but there was an edge to it. "I see you've called for a meeting. What is this all about?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself before responding. "This is about everything, Lorena. About the lies, the manipulation, and the damage you've caused. But most of all, this is about the truth coming to light." Her smile faltered for a moment, just long enough for me to catch it. But then, she straightened up, trying to regain control. "I'm not sure what you think you're going to accomplish here," she said, her voice colder now. "You've lost Isabel. Javier is with me now. He understands what's at stake. You're the one who's been left behind." I couldn't help but laugh. "You really think that, don't you?" I said, stepping closer to her. "You think that because you've spent all these years manipulating him, you've won? Let me tell you something, Lorena. You've never understood Javier, not truly. And that's why you've already lost." She opened her mouth to retort, but before she could, Javier stepped forward. His voice was firm, unwavering. "Mom's right, Lorena. I've seen the truth now, and I'm not on your side anymore." Her eyes widened in shock, and for the first time in years, I saw her lose her composure. The mask she had carefully built up over the years began to crack, and I could feel a strange satisfaction stirring within me. It was like watching a puppet's strings being cut, and for once, I didn't feel sorry for her. I felt empowered. "I'm not going to stand by and watch you tear this family apart anymore," Javier continued, his voice growing stronger. "I've already made up my mind. This is over." Lorena's face twisted in anger. "You don't know what you're saying. I've been the one holding this family together, not her. I've worked hard for everything we have." "Oh, really?" I interrupted, my voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "You've been holding this family together? That's rich. You've been lying, stealing, and using every one of us to get what you wanted. You've manipulated everything. And now it's time for you to face the consequences." I could see the panic in her eyes now, the realization that her world was falling apart. The foundation she had so carefully built her lies upon was crumbling beneath her feet, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Javier and I exchanged a look, a silent agreement that this was it. The moment of truth had come. I pulled the ETU documents from my bag and placed them on the table in front of Lorena. The stack was thick, filled with legal papers, financial records, and evidence of everything she'd done. "These are the records," I said, my voice steady and calm. "The real ones. The ones you thought you'd hidden from me. And this," I pointed to the last page, "is the proof that I own everything. The house, the businesses, everything. You tried to steal from me. It's mine." Lorena looked at the papers, her face paling as she realized what she was seeing. Her eyes darted back and forth over the documents, but there was no escaping the truth. The lies she had built her life on were exposed. "You can't do this," she screamed, her voice breaking. "I've worked for everything. You can't take it all from me." But I wasn't listening anymore. The years of pain, of sacrifice, of being ignored and mistreated, they all came rushing back in that moment. And for the first time I felt no sympathy, no hesitation. "Lorena," I said, my voice cold, "you don't get to play the victim anymore. You don't get to destroy our family and walk away unscathed. You've made your choice, and now... So, have I? Javier stepped forward, standing beside me. You've got two choices now, Lorena. You leave and we go our separate ways. Or you fight, and we make sure everyone knows the truth about what you've done. She stood there, trembling with rage, her eyes wild, but there was no way out for her now. The truth had been revealed, and it was over. She turned and walked out without another word. Her shoulders slumped, the air around her heavy with defeat. Lorena's departure left an eerie silence in its wake. The moment she walked out that door, something inside me shifted. It wasn't relief exactly, nor was it victory. It was a mix of exhaustion, satisfaction, and a strange, quiet peace. For the first time in years, I felt the weight of the past lift off my shoulders. It was as if I'd been carrying a boulder for far too long, and now it was gone. Javier and I stood in the middle of the living room, the place that had once been a battlefield. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was the silence of understanding, of shared experience. We didn't need words to know what had just happened. We both felt it. The shift. The closure. Javier finally broke the silence. Mom, I don't even know what to say. His voice was thick with emotion, and I could hear the guilt lingering in his tone. I turned to him, placing a hand gently on his arm. You don't have to say anything, Javier. I've always known where your heart was. You just needed time to see the truth. He nodded, his eyes brimming with unshed tears. I'm so sorry for not seeing it sooner. I should have known. I squeezed his arm, offering a reassuring smile. We're here now. That's what matters. We stood there, the two of us, as the weight of everything that had happened slowly started to sink in. But in that moment, it wasn't the past that mattered. It was the future. The future we could finally build, free of the toxicity that had once ruled our lives. The next few days were a blur. There were legal meetings, paperwork, and the slow process of rebuilding what Lorena had tried to destroy. But through it all, there was a sense of hope that I hadn't felt in years. Javier and I worked together, meticulously going through every document, making sure everything was in order. And for the first time in what felt like forever, there were moments of laughter between us. Real, heartfelt moments. One afternoon, after a long day of meetings, we sat down at the kitchen table. It was a simple meal, just the two of us. And in that simplicity, there was something incredibly profound. The world had shifted, and we were no longer bound by the past. We were free. I've been thinking a lot, Mom, Javier said, breaking the comfortable silence. About what you said before, about how you built this family, how you fought for everything. I want to be part of that. I want to help you rebuild. I looked at him, my heart swelling with pride. You already are, Javier. You always have been. He smiled, a genuine smile that was free of guilt or doubt. I know, but I want to do more. I want to help you with the business, with everything. We're in this together. It was more than I could have hoped for. Not just that he was offering to help, but that he had truly understood what it meant to fight, to build, to stand together. The days turned into weeks, and soon the legal battles were behind us. The house, the business, everything that had once been under Lorena's control was officially mine. Ours, really. Javier and I had shared this victory, but we had also shared the journey to get there. And now, as we looked toward the future, there was nothing that could stop us. One afternoon, as we were sitting on the porch, talking about the next steps, the doorbell rang again. My heart skipped a beat, thinking it might be Lorena returning. But when I opened the door, I was met with the familiar face of my old friend, Maria. She smiled warmly, her eyes twinkling with that familiar kindness. "Isabel, it's been far too long," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "Maria!" I exclaimed, pulling her into a hug. It had been years since I'd seen her, and yet, in that moment, it felt like no time had passed at all. Javier, who had been sitting at the table, stood up and walked over to greet her. "It's good to see you, Maria," he said, his voice filled with warmth. We spent the next few hours catching up, sharing stories of the past and talking about the future. Maria was the first person who had truly seen me for who I was, long before all of this. She had been there for me when no one else had, and now she was back to help me celebrate this new chapter of my life. As the evening wore on, we sat around the table, eating, laughing, and talking. It was the kind of moment I'd longed for, the kind of moment that felt like family, like home. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I truly belonged. But even as I sat there, surrounded by those I loved, I couldn't help but reflect on everything that had brought me here. The pain, the betrayal, the years of feeling invisible. But more than that, I thought about the strength it had taken to get here. I had fought for my family. I had fought for my place. And now, I was finally at peace. As the night came to a close, and Maria said her goodbyes, I stood on the porch, looking out at the quiet street. The world had changed. Lorena was gone, and the future was bright. Javier and I had a chance to rebuild, to create something new, something better. And as I stood there, I realized something. No matter how hard life had been, no matter the injustice I had always had the power to change my story. I had always been the one holding the pen. Months passed, and the dust that once clouded our lives had finally settled. The wounds were still there, etched deep in the memory. But they had begun to heal, not through forgetting, but through forgiving. Not forgiving Lorena. No. Some things were too corrosive, too malicious to be excused. But forgiving ourselves, Javier for his blindness, and me for allowing my silence to grow roots. That forgiveness was necessary, and it became the soil where our new life was planted. The house no longer felt like a battleground. The walls that once echoed with tension now embraced us with peace. Javier had moved back in temporarily to help with renovations, and his presence filled the space with a warmth I hadn't felt in years. Every morning he'd make coffee just the way I liked it. Strong, no sugar, and leave it by the window where I sat to watch the sunrise. A small gesture, but a monumental change. Valentina visited often. Her laughter now echoed freely through the rooms that had once heard too many harsh words. She'd bring her sketchbooks, scatter them across the table, and ask me for opinions, as if I were an expert on art. Sometimes we'd bake together, like we used to when she was little, flour dusting our faces and the scent of cinnamon filling the air. One Sunday, she asked if she could paint a mural on the garden wall. Something to mark a new chapter, she said. I watched her for days as she sketched, measured, and brought the bricks to life with color. When she finally finished, I stood before it in silence, moved beyond words. It was a tree, massive and powerful, its roots deep, its branches stretching, wide. At its center, a silhouette of a woman. Her hair in the wind, her back straight, her hands open. "That's you," she whispered. "You held everything together. The mural became a symbol not just of recovery, but of truth, of legacy, of strength born not from loudness, but from endurance." The business I'd once quietly managed from the shadows was now fully mine. I rebranded it, not out of spite, but out of pride. It bore my name now, Isabel's Hearth. A reflection of what it always was, a center of warmth built with care. Orders increased, clients returned. Some even wrote letters, saying they had always suspected who the real backbone behind everything was. I kept those letters in a drawer, never showing them to anyone. They were private reminders that being invisible didn't mean being insignificant. Javier was different too. More attentive, more grounded. He no longer flinched at conflict, no longer avoided difficult conversations. He had faced the truth of his past, and in doing so, become a better man, a better son. Every now and then, I'd catch him staring at old photos of his father and me. Once, I asked what he was thinking. He said, "I finally understand what he saw in you." Sometimes I thought of Lorena, not out of longing or bitterness, but as a curiosity. Where had she gone? What version of herself was she now sculpting, far from us? I didn't wish her harm, but I didn't wish her back either. Some chapters must remain closed, and yet her absence created room for something unexpected. Calm. My days were no longer measured by tension. They were filled with gardening, cooking, books left half-finished and then returned to with joy. I hosted dinners again, small, intimate gatherings. Friends, neighbors, and once, even Valentina's teacher came by. We laughed, we shared stories, and we remembered who we were when we were not just surviving. I learned how to dance again. Not just in the physical sense, but emotionally. To move with life's rhythm instead of against it. One evening, with Ta, music playing softly in the background, I found myself dancing alone in the living room. Javier walked in and chuckled. "Didn't know you still had moves," he teased. "I never lost them," I said with a wink. And perhaps that's what this whole journey was about. Reclaiming the parts of me that had been buried under years of silence and sacrifice. I wasn't just the mother or the mother-in-law. I wasn't the cook or the housekeeper or the quiet woman in the background. I was Isabel. A woman who had loved deeply, hurt quietly, and risen with quiet thunder when the world tried to erase her. One afternoon, I sat with Valentina on the porch. The sky was painted in oranges and purples. She leaned against my shoulder and said, "Abuela, when I grow up, I want to be just like you." I smiled. Not because I needed to be admired, but because I knew she saw me, truly saw me. And in that moment, I realized I'd already won the battle that mattered most. Not the fight for property or for appearances, but the fight to be known, to be remembered, to be loved, deeply and without condition. In the end, it wasn't revenge that gave me peace. It was truth. It was family, rebuilt from the ashes. It was the quiet power of finally being seen. So if you ever find yourself silenced, overlooked, cast aside, remember this. Sometimes, the strongest voice is the one that rises last. Sometimes, the ones they try to erase are the ones who write the final chapter. And sometimes, being invisible was just the beginning of being unforgettable.